Midsommar is Ari Aster's second directed horror film that follows the story of Dani, who after a family tragedy decides to join her boyfriend and his friends on a vacation to Sweden. Fuck, did I get the country wrong? They go on a trip to some country in Europe where some cult stuff happens and it's creepy. So this movie I was really excited for. I have a top 3 most excited movies of the year for me, and it's Midsommar, Little Women, and Star Wars. So this was the first one to come out, and I had really high expectations because Ari Aster directed my favorite film of last year, Hereditary, and I think Hereditary is a masterpiece. So it was impossible for me not to have really high expectations going into this movie. And I know that oftentimes when you have expectations like that, the movie probably won't reach them. I was really afraid Ari Aster would turn into kind of an M. Night Shyamalan type, where he starts out as a masterpiece and then gets worse with each movie. So let's talk about this movie. There is a lot to love about this film. Firstly, Ari Aster's directorial stamp is all over this film. After watching Hereditary, when you watch this movie, you see Ari Aster's style and technique and the way he likes to do things and set things up, and this definitely feels like an Ari Aster movie. The presentation, the cinematography, and the editing were all absolutely eye-gouging. The cinematography in particular had my jaw hitting the floor at several points of the film. I really hope that this movie gets nominated for Best Cinematography at the Oscars, because it seriously deserves that nomination. The visuals of this film are so gorgeous. The camera does so many things that makes my eyes gouge out of my skull, and it was just really impressive to see all the crazy ideas that these guys came up with for the presentation. Similarly, the editing is just really great. It makes you constantly watching the film and always paying attention, and you never really get bored or look away because of these things. The acting is phenomenal, especially by Florence Pugh as Dani. She was great. She had some great crying moments that I was incredibly impressed by. The first act is a great setup to the character drama, so we get a lot of what Dani's family tragedy is, and the acting and presentation of all that was creepy and eerie and just really sets up this character drama. Also, because the two leads in this movie aren't really in a good relationship with each other, and we see that very early on, which was set up really well. The second act gets very strange in a good way. So much like a lot of horror movies, you see weird shit happening and you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense, that's really creepy, why is that happening? Just a lot of events like that happen off screen, and it's very engaging for you to keep watching and see how the group of people changes and wondering to yourself what could possibly be going on in the background, because this movie is very creepy and unsettling to look at. There's a lot of bright lights and people smiling, and that's not something that you see in a horror movie often, but given how the atmosphere is and how the movie is presented, these bright lights and smiling faces are just very unsettling and creepy, and it really makes you nervous while watching it. I think it's a very daring idea to make a horror film in this brightly lit scenario, because usually that's not what horror films do. They put it in the darkest place possible so that you can't really see much. Not saying that's a bad thing, that's a great idea, because it can make the person not know what's happening on screen as well as they need to, so it scares them more. But having it in this bright light was not really to hide anything on screen, it was more so to give you this sense of untrusting, because normally when you see light, you can trust what you see in front of you, but because of the drugs and other things that go on, you really can't do that. If I were to judge the movie based on the first 2 acts, it would absolutely get an A+. But unfortunately, this movie has a third act that kinda goes downhill a lot. I'm not gonna get into spoilers, but usually when you watch a movie like this where a lot of creepy shit happens and that's unexplained and that you're really confused by, there's this moment of catharsis in the third act where it kind of pieces everything together and you suddenly realize what has been going on and what the significance of all this weird weird shit is. Midsommar doesn't have that moment of catharsis. There's never a moment in this movie that it stitches everything together, and it makes scenes seem completely pointless. A lot of the creepy stuff that happens in the second act, I expected an explanation for in the third act, and we don't get that, so it really makes me wonder what the point of those things were, and if there even was a point to those things at all. Especially the first 20 minutes of the film, looking back on it, when we get Danny's backstory, it's very, very interesting and very, very distinct and different than you would expect. So they put a lot of emphasis on how weird it was, meaning I thought that we were going to get an explanation of this and that it was going to circle back to the end of the film, and that really wasn't what happened, and it really makes me wonder what the point of that was either. So this movie doesn't have as much answers as I think it should, and it really makes me a little frustrated, I guess, because Hereditary, you have all those answers in the film, you just need to look for it. It's not like I wasn't looking for those answers. Knowing what I knew from Hereditary after seeing it 3 times, I was really looking at it the same way I looked at Hereditary, and maybe I just need to see it a second time, but I'm very disappointed in the ending of this film because it really doesn't explain anything at all to you. It's very similar to the movie Enemy. I think that the ending of this movie is more similar to Enemy than it is Hereditary. So if you loved Enemy, you're probably gonna love this movie. If you loved Hereditary, you'll probably be a little disappointed. I was a little disappointed by the ending. I was hoping for at least an A or A minus, but in the end, I'm going to give Midsommar a B+. There is a lot to love in this film. There is so much eye-gouging visuals. It's phenomenal. I definitely recommend that you go out and see it if you like horror movies. If you liked Hereditary, go to see it with the expectation that it's not going to be as good as Hereditary. Anyways, this might be my favorite film I've seen so far this year. I gave it a B+. I gave Endgame an A- in my initial review of it, but looking back on that, I think it's more of a B+, so who knows? It's one of those two movies. I can't really tell. Anyways, stay tuned for tomorrow, guys. I have a video called The Thing vs. Alien coming out, and it should be a lot of fun.